Todd Elliott, and I'm a student in HIUS 530, American Christian Heritage, and I'm very excited to give my presentation in the oldest church in the state of Virginia. I have with me Colin Norman, Assistant Director of the historic St. Luke's Church. And Colin, just you mind telling us a little bit about the church, how old it is, and what the mission is of the museum?
Sure. The church here, according to local tradition, dates here to 1632. According to architectural evidence, historians and scholars like to put a date on us of about 1686. So either date you use, we're still the oldest church building here in Virginia, which of course makes us fairly nifty. But we're open here 7 days a week. Our congregation moved out of here in 1836, so we are no longer an active church by any means. Anyway, we today operate as a 501c3 nonprofit museum. We talk about the restoration here that goes on with the structure. We talk about that colonial struggle there for 17th century and separation of church and state, and it goes on here as well. So it's a wide-ranging mission, but it's a lot of fun doing it. So.
I would imagine. I'm just in awe being here. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the mission of the museum, about First Amendment rights, and how we support our First Amendment, our Constitution, through a site such as this?
Sure. Well, of course, this was originally, traditionally, a Church of England, Anglican structure here. Church of England in the 17th century in the colony of Virginia was basically the only game in town. So if you wanted to go to church here, of course, you were required basically by law to attend services here at least once per month. By those same rules and regulations, you were usually paying vestry taxes directly to the Church of England, regardless of if you believed it here or not. So we do a lot of talking about those time frames there and where we have gone from that state-sanctioned religion to the freedoms of religion that we have here guaranteed within the United States today. So that's an ongoing project here. You know, it's still, even in today's realm, still something that's often talked about in today's modern politics. So it's a constant, thing you got to look at your history and see where you came from and such here too. So it's an ongoing project, even in today's standards. So.
And where can they get more information online?
Well, of course, you can find us online at www.historicstluke's.org. And of course, that Saint is abbreviated, so just ST. Of course, you can Google Historic St. Luke's Church here in Smithfield, Virginia. You can usually find us there. Facebook, Twitter, Google, you name it. We're basically on everything these days. So, 17th century structure, but we've got some modern tricks.
Colin, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
My topic today is the influence of Black Catholicism in education. In our textbook, A History of Christianity in the United States and Canada, Mark Knoll, professor of history at Notre Dame University, noted in his chapter titled, Non-White, Non-Protestant, that African Americans have been predominant in the Baptist, Methodist, or independent denominations. And that is sometimes forgotten that there's a long tradition of blacks in the Catholic Church. That statement intrigued me, raised as I was in the Baptist tradition here in Southeast Virginia. This led me to learn a little more about this facet of the American religious experience. I was only vaguely aware that there was a long tradition of Black Catholics in the Americas, thanks to their arrival with the Spanish conquistadors and colonizers, as well as the French in the Northern Territories that are now part of present-day Canada. The preliminary thesis for my research was the role of Catholicism in the lives of Africans and their descendants in the 13 English colonies. This train of thought led me to wonder how much influence did Black Americans have in shaping their own brand of worship, something that we have witnessed frequently in Protestant denominations. The historiography of Black Catholicism in antebellum Southern states, which was described as bleak in the lack of coverage in the early days by American Studies professor Randall M. Miller of St. Joseph's University. Miller lamented the lack of information on the subject during the years of slavery and numbered approximately 100,000 Negro adherents of the faith by 1860. This has made research through primary source material somewhat challenging. Overview and thesis. Catholicism has been an important denomination in the early years of the original colonies, perhaps less so in that of Black Americans. Beginning with slavery, Africans and their offspring were subject to a variety of religious experiences, and for the most part, that flavor was Protestant, and within that, predominantly Baptist and Methodist. Martineau observed that little was known about the impact of the Catholic Church, but what has come to light in recent scholarship was the fact that the Catholic faith played an important role in the lives of descendants of Africans in America, and one of those roles was education. The thesis will explore the role of African American women Catholics, the role they played in early American education, and the mechanisms that were implemented which made a difference in the Black communities they served. Special attention in this video presentation will go toward the work of the Oblate Sisters of Providence. The facts were interesting, and the individuals who responded to those community needs put me in mind of Deuteronomy 7:6, New American Bible Translation, which reads, "You are a people sacred to the Lord your God. He has chosen you from all the nations on the earth, on the face of the earth, to be a people peculiarly his own." One of the names that appeared frequently in my research on Black Catholic history was that of Father Cyprian Davis, a Benedictine monk of St. Meinrad Archabbey, and himself an African American. His book, The History of Black Catholics in the United States, is a good general history for those who are interested in the subject. Father Davis wrote about various aspects of this history, but one section that resonated with me was his chapter, Builders of the Faith, Black Religious Women Before and After the Civil War. Religious life among Black Catholics, Davis wrote, began in Kentucky in 1824 with a community of 3 free Black women whom Charles Ninrick brought together as an auxiliary group linked with the Sisters of Loretto. Ninrick had been a Belgian priest who arrived in the U.S. following the aftermath of the French Revolution. He founded a religious community of women in the Bluegrass State, the Friends of Mary at the Foot of the Cross, or later simply known as the Sisters of Loretto. This sisterhood established a school for girls, and they were encouraged by him to include Black girls as students. 3 of these young women became the postulants of a foundation attached to the order, but Ninrick did not live long after, and neither did the special community that he founded. The incoming priest saw no need for Black sisters, and the foundation was dissolved. The names of those 3 women had been lost in time. Davis went on to relate the first successful foundation of Black sisters, which occurred just a few years later in 1827. Sulpician priest Jacques Hector Nicholas Joubert took over the chapel of St. Mary's Seminary on Paca Street in Baltimore, Maryland. At the same time, a Haitian refugee colony existed in Baltimore, and 4 women of color worshiped there on Sundays. Joubert, a native of Western France, had served as a government official in Saint-Domingue, fleeing the slave revolution there. Shortly after his arrival to St. Mary's, he had trouble teaching the Haitian children their catechism. 2 of the Haitian women in his flock had already established a school in their home, and they consecrated their lives to God and began their religious lives anew. On July 1829, 4 women, led by Elizabeth Lang as their first superior, along with Marie Ballas, Rosine Bogue, and Duchamine Maxis, had made their profession and were ready to create a new community of Black sisterhood with the vocation of education of Black children, the Oblate Sisters of Providence. I will refer to them occasionally by the initials OSP. With the Blessed Virgin as patron, the sisters chose secondary patron saints of St. Francis of Rome, who herself had also founded a religious community of women, along with St. Benedict the Moor, an African who opposed the slave trade. This action of creating a black foundation did not go unnoticed, nor without protest. Taking a step back, Colonel Posey, an Army Reserve chaplain and a founding member of the National Black Catholic Clergy Caucus, posed important questions about race and the Catholic faith in this article on African American Catholicism and the Oblate Sisters of Providence, starting with the core beliefs of Africans in and around Baltimore and how they complemented their spirituality, the providence of God, the extended family, the church as a place for everyone. Posey showed that their worldview and that of their offspring embraced the notion of a universal church in the truest sense, juxtaposing the elements of a passive Catholicism that blacks were taught. They added their own elements that made it dynamic and resulted in the OSP. Perhaps one of the most important works in recent scholarship is the book Persons of Color and Religious at the Same Time, The Oblate Sisters of Providence, 1828 to 1860, by Diane Batts Morrow. Morrow, an associate history professor at the University of Georgia, is recognized as an authority on the OSP. Her book covers the lives of the founding members of the sisterhood, which included Lang, Bolus, Bogue, and Duchamine, and how these four women reacted to the racism in the American Catholic Church and in society at large that prompted them to take action and start this religious order. Consider how progressive this was for the time, and it took the advocacy of white males to validate the Oblate cause. This cause, which would soon incorporate healthcare in the face of an epidemic some years later, was part of the religious culture where women were subordinate within the ecclesiastical hierarchy, but it could also be particularly challenging for women of color. Joubert produced the Oblate Rule, a constitution that was designed to help the sisters navigate the difficulties engendered by their black racial identity in a racist slaveholding society. The first paragraph reads, "The Oblate Sisters of Providence are a religious society of colored women established in Baltimore with the approbation of the Most Reverend Archbishop. The Oblates renounce the world to consecrate themselves to God and to the Christian education of young girls of color." This explicit self-identification of the community set it apart from other orders. By 1832, Joubert had secured approval from the diocese and papal acknowledgments, the first permanent religious community of black women in the Catholic Church. Sister M. Reginald Yerdes, a researcher and a member of the Oblate Sisters in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, wrote about her order's work in the 19th century and examined the concept and practice of education by black Americans for black Americans, which was nothing less than the establishment of a permanent black Catholic school in the slave state of Maryland. The sisters opened and staffed schools for young people, conducted night classes for women, provided homes for widows and orphans, offered vocational and career training, opened a free school for children whose parents could not afford a Catholic education, and started an institution for Civil War orphans. In fact, their efforts at evangelizing the Negro community during the mid-19th century was so great that the foundress, Sister Mary Elizabeth Lang, designated the last 6 pews for whites only as a gesture of gratitude to the white benefactors who regularly attended Mass at the chapel in St. Francis. As their schools expanded, these early black educators could insert their unique cultural and social experiences into the schools that they created. The curriculum for girls included reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, fine arts, music, and French. Here it is noted that the early Oblate sisters were fluent in French and Spanish. Others would follow, and I wish that time would permit me to discuss in detail the work that took place in New Orleans by the Sisters of the Holy Family, as recounted in the book No Cross, No Crown, Black Nuns in 19th Century New Orleans. This sisterhood was influenced by the Ursulines and became the first religious community of women of African descent in 1830s Louisiana. Or leaders such as Bishop John England, who led the Diocese of Charleston, South Carolina. Bishop England was a firm believer in educating slave children in the faith and insisted on full inclusion of the faithful in all the sacraments regardless of race. In addition to religious education, England attempted to provide secular instruction to blacks, opening a free school for black boys, only to be forced to shut it down. From the 1860s into the 20th century, the Oblate Sisters' influence expanded beyond Baltimore and established missions in Philadelphia, New Orleans, the Midwest, the Southeast, and the Caribbean. In a 1929 article published in the Baltimore Afro-American upon the centennial of the OSP, one reporter wrote, "The sisters comprise, no doubt, perhaps the most significant contribution of the Negro woman to contrite religion. Their work is significant in the fact that it is demonstrated without doubt that the Negro woman can rise to the exalted heights of complete self-abnegation and can consecrate every minute of her life to some unselfish cause. For 100 years, a group of race women have made of themselves a living sacrifice to the cause of Christianity and service. And the great Catholic Church does well to pause and pay tribute to the Oblate Sisters, who have conducted missions in which thousands of boys and girls have been given a touch of human unselfishness. Not only the Catholic Church, but the race as a group and religion as a whole might turn aside Sunday to pray a prayer of thanksgiving that the deeper spirit of Christ lives in the deeds of the Oblate Sisters of Providence." This student couldn't have said it better. Thank you for watching. Go online to find out more information about historic St. Luke's Church Museum. You'll find it fascinating.